Steven Spielberg is the master movie maker of our generation, quite likely the most popular film director of all time. With Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T., he entertained, amused and charmed us. Then, as he developed into a more serious and more mature director, he gave us The Colour Purple, Schindler's List and Amistad to challenge us, make us think and get angry. Now he's turned his sights on war with a film about D-Day that's so authentic it's being hailed as the greatest anti-war film ever made.
Clear the rim! 30 seconds! I'll be with you!
More than half a century after World War II, Steven Spielberg has shown us what it was really like.
I'll see you on the beach!
For the first relentless half hour of Saving Private Ryan, we, the audience, are there for the gut-wrenching experience of battle. It's a huge ask to put the audience right into the line of fire like that.
Yes.
Did you expect this film, of all the ones you've made, to have this extraordinary impact that it's had?
No, I didn't. Because, you know, when you make a picture, you get so close to it, you stop seeing the picture and you rely on other people to tell you what you've done, in a sense. So I didn't expect it to have the commercial success it's having in America right now. I never expected that.
Covering fire!
It's D-Day, the first day of the Allied invasion of Europe. A day when 5,000 American soldiers were slaughtered on Omaha Beach.
Damn firing squad.
It's the only way we can get everybody the hell out of here.
Spielberg's recreation is truly harrowing. In fact, many of the scenes are too graphic to show this early on a Sunday evening.
Covering fire!
Do you think that young people should watch the film?
Depends on how we define young people. You know, I've been going throughout America saying if you can drive a car, you can see Saving Private Ryan, or even get your learner's permit at 15 years old, you can see the movie. And certainly if you can fight in a war, as often our boys did at 17 years old in World War II, you search. But I think 14 years old and under, parents should be awfully careful about themselves judging whether their kids should see it or not. I personally did not let my younger kids see the picture.
How young are they?
13 and under.
For much of his extraordinary career, Steven Spielberg was the Peter Pan of Hollywood, the boy who never grew up, much to the delight of his audiences. But long before he became the greatest showman on earth, the young Spielberg was fascinated by war.
I was actually 14 years old. I made a little 8mm war movie called Escape to Nowhere, using my dad's movie camera, and made it where I was living in Scottsdale, Arizona, using all my friends as German and American soldiers. And it was the first time I had made a war film. And of course, that was inspired from all the war pictures I was watching on television. And I later found out that all those movies were not accurate.
For a long time, Spielberg was happy with the comic book version of war. His own action movies, full of goodies and baddies, were exhilarating entertainment and pure escapism. In many of the films, the Nazis, for you, have been almost caricatures of evil.
Well, you know, I really feel that, you know, the Indiana Jones movies, it was easy to pick on the Nazis as a politically correct enemy. And, but I felt with Saving Private Ryan, there are no real Nazis in Saving Private Ryan. And it was very important for me to convey the fact that those boys fighting for Germany and our boys fighting for America were just boys, hurling projectiles toward one another, and which is really what war is all about. It supersedes politics, it supersedes ideology, and it becomes basically a journey towards survival.
What this director has achieved is, by many accounts, the most authentic depiction of war we have ever seen. Truly, your film moved me, returned me to many of the wars that I've seen as a mere storyteller. Was it the foot soldiers' war that you have been trying to catch?
Yeah, it was the Soldiers' War. It was the first line Soldiers' War.
It reminds me of the experience, the reality of running and trying to shoot and keeping your head down and just surviving, let alone fighting.
Yeah. I mean, I have not fought in a war. You actually have more experience in your life than I have in mine with battlefield conditions. But I simply interpreted, as a journalist sometimes has to do, what the veterans were personally telling me, what I had read about in books, and what I had seen in documentaries of that war, the Second World War. You know, I didn't want to make just another World War II picture that would not have withstood the test of time in the veterans' opinion. I was more interested in pleasing the veterans, in fact, than I was in pleasing the audience. And I guess I was just trying to say to my dad, who's 81 years old and fought in Burma, I'm sort of trying to say to him and everybody like him, thank you for allowing the baby boomer generation to even exist, which therefore allowed the next generation to exist.
The Normandy graves were a powerful reminder to Spielberg of the sacrifice of so many Allied soldiers who didn't come home. The surviving American veterans have been so overwhelmed by the realism of Saving Private Ryan, they've given it a special award, saying for once, Hollywood has got it right. I've got to tell you, I saw a 70-year-old man who was of that war when I saw the film in Los Angeles, and he was in the bathroom after the screening and he was crying just uncontrollably. He said, that is how it was, that is how it was. And it gives me chills to remember him saying it to me.
Well, it gives me chills to hear that, it really does. And that's a good thing, you know. It's a brave thing for veterans to allow themselves the experience of seeing this picture.
I wonder when young men see the film in any country, whether they'll be rushing to volunteer if we have another big world war.
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. I think there's a clear picture of war that would, you know, give people pause. As a father, I have tremendous pause, having gone through the experience of making Saving Private Ryan, that I would not want my children to fight anywhere in the world unless it was a necessary war, unless, you know, Western democracy again was in peril. And the choice was to live or die on a global scale.
It's just that I haven't held a weapon since basic training, sir.
Did you fire the weapon in basic training?
Yes, sir.
Well, then get your gear.
Yes, sir.
Spielberg's soldiers are not all heroes like the Tom Hanks character. One in particular, the young Corporal Upham, is full of trepidation, and when thrown into battle, can't pull the trigger.
I, in fact, created Upham's character because he was more like I imagined I would be in a war. And when I was asked by Tom Hanks, are you me or are you somebody else in the squad? Because I always like to be somebody in one of my films. I said, I wish I was you, Tom. I'm not you. I'm Jeremy, you know, Davies, who plays Corporal Upham. That's who I think I am.
If you were in the real situation, do you think you could pull the trigger or sink in the bayonet?
I'm not certain about that. I certainly think to save my own life, I would pull the trigger. I'm not certain I could pull the trigger to save my own country.
This filmmaker has always been good at frightening us. Fear is such a potent element in so many of his movies.
I understand fear, and I am a fearful person. You know, for a while my fear just came from my imagination, and then recently with some personal events in my own personal life and my family's life, fear became palpable. It suddenly became an actual, you know, enemy.
Just last year, Spielberg and his family were living in terror under threat from a crazed stalker.
Steven Spielberg told the judge he believes he would have been raped or maimed or killed if Jonathan Norman had confronted him.
I certainly can conjure fear up the way an actor can conjure memories that will cause them to cry on cue, and I can conjure fear at the drop of a hat, which makes me a good candidate in a way to be able to tell a story like this. But at the same time, when I finally discovered what it really was, it sort of it humbled me more.
In his remarkable film, Schindler's List, Steven Spielberg was confronting his fear on an epic scale, the dread of the Jewish people facing extinction. Is that personal fear you're talking about? Linking up with the history of the Holocaust and imagining your place in that scheme of things?
Yeah, I could imagine that quite easily. You know, I could imagine that just by my birthright of being a Jew, there were 12 countries that would have been an instant death sentence for me between 1938 and 1945. And I felt that palpable fear when I went to Poland, which was a killing field then. Survivor testimonies on videotape, and we're cataloging them and databasing them and eventually putting them on CD-ROM and creating teaching tools that free of charge will go out to all the public and private schools in America and then later overseas. And I'm the most excited about that project.
Does that matter to you as much as any of the fiction that you're creating?
It matters to me more than any of the fiction I've created. If I had to make a choice at this point in my life between fiction and nonfiction, I would choose nonfiction.
E.T. home phone.
E.T. phone home.
Steven Spielberg is first and foremost a storyteller, and his greatest talent has always been to get us to join him for the ride.
Why do we make movies? Why do we tell stories? I've often asked myself that question, and I always come up with the same answer. You know, I simply tell stories because I got to. I have no other choice in my life. I have nothing else to do but tell stories. It's what I like to do more than anything else.
Someday we might look back on this and decide that Saving Private Ryan was the one decent thing we were able to pull out of this whole god-awful shitty mess.
The stories Spielberg is now choosing to tell are far more powerful, far more relevant. The world's greatest entertainer is demanding more from his audience and more from himself. Something has changed in the Steven Spielberg we used to watch.
What changed was, you know, I had kids, and I had a lot of kids. And the more kids I had, the more it changed. I've also gotten older. You know, I'm a different man at 51 than I was a boy at 26 when I made Jaws. So as you get older, I think your tastes change and your views on life alter, and you just see things differently. And I was happy I wasn't a victim of Arrested Development. That was good. But I also don't want to lose the proverbial child inside me, because I love telling stories, and I want to make movies for my children that my children can be proud of. They can say, you know, yeah, Dad made those pictures for the grown-ups, but he made the next picture for us. So I don't want to get away from that altogether.
You still want to reach the kid in all of us.
Yeah, I would like to reach my kids.